Thank you so much for watching. My name is Glenn Morgan, and this is We the Governed, and I really do appreciate the fact that you are logging in and willing to spend a few minutes with me reviewing Washington State and other issues that really need to be covered sometimes, especially when we're covering the political world. Now, today I'm going to jump right into the story because I think it matters. Today I want to talk about the fact that Stop SNAP fraud has been going on now for quite a while. Big news yesterday. They basically announced that they had pulled 700,000 illegals and fraudsters were purged from the supplemental nutrition and assistance program for people, or food stamps, essentially known as a food stamp program. And this is in the news, and it's affecting Washington State. And the main focus of this is going to be how this issue is affecting Washington State and how our state's playing a role in the unfolding fiasco and drama that's going on out there right now. So this is more than just the shutdown theater. Now, obviously, it's getting a lot more tension because of the whole shutdown theater. And, you see a lot of people basically panicking because they think, oh, my word, I'm going to lose my food stamps. It's the worst possible thing in the world. And there's a lot of panic going on out there. And it looks like a lot of different things. You've been seeing a lot of TikTok videos of very entitled people freaking out about the fact that they have a potential to lose a month or two of their food stamp, EBT cards, SNAP benefits, depending on what they want to call it. But essentially, it's all the same program, and boy, do they not want to lose that. Now, before we go too much further, I just want to point out that if you have not hit the subscribe and like button, please do so down below. It doesn't cost you anything except for a few seconds of your time, and it's always helpful to share this video out and leave your comments if you think I've missed the boat on something. I always appreciate it. I do read them, and I will do my best to get back to them. So let's go back to now the shutdown theater and the high drama of all the people that are concerned about losing food stamps or EBT cards. Now, obviously, it's made the news more recently just because, the funny thing about this, I think, is really just this whole social media element of it, where people are willing to go out and brag about all the money that or about how they even are cheating or lying or falsifying information so they can get thousands of dollars in benefits, and they'll show you their statement to show you how much money's coming in, or they'll show you their insanely bad choices when it comes to what they're buying food for their kids or themselves. It's pretty bad. And then, of course, you always have the fraud issues, which are also starting to pop up here a little bit more. And in this case, there was a story out of Ohio, but trust me, there's hundreds of these. You had a story out of Seattle as well, where basically the story out of Ohio was somebody who basically set up a $150,000 fraud operation using EBT cards. In Washington State, we had them basically, they do this every couple of years. They'll go down and they'll bust all the drug addicts selling or handing off their cards in exchange for a hit of meth or fentanyl or something. And then the whole fraud operation where the people who get the cards are buying stuff that they can sell back to the stores, and everybody gets their cut and everybody's winning except for you and I, the taxpayer, because the fraud is so common and found everywhere. It's frustrating for those people who actually do pay taxes, and nobody likes to see billions and billions of dollars wasted on fraud or people who don't deserve to have these benefits. Now, what happens is, of course, Washington State's Governor Ferguson decides recently, as he announced, he's going to outsource most of his policy decisions and thinking to Governor Newsom, or maybe British Columbia, or possibly Tina Kotek down in Oregon, as they all want to get together and pretend like they haven't put themselves in the situation through bad and incompetent decisions themselves. And the reason why they do this is it goes back to a human nature issue where misery loves company. Once somebody is failing, and all of these jurisdictions that have all lumped together in some kind of Cascadia conference game have failed specifically and explicitly on all the programs that he claims and pretends that they're going to work on together. Homelessness, drug addiction, crime, affordable housing, the Green New Scam, whatever it is, these guys, we picked the worst states. And I think it is this whole misery needs company kind of thing. It makes a lot of sense when you understand that they don't want to be the specifically targeted. So it's easier if you get together in a group and you can all go down together and then you say, see, I wasn't alone. Because when you fail together, the blame is far easier to deflect. Say, nobody saw it coming. Who would have known that if we gave $1 billion a year to homeless drug addicts down in Seattle, that we would attract a lot more and that crime would go up? Who would have known? I mean, we were all on the same page together. Now let's dig into the SNAP benefits, because this is just really, it's a symptom of a bigger problem, but you kind of have to understand the significance of this program in Washington State. Now, the paper will say that it's roughly 10%, so 1 in 10 people are on SNAP benefits. The specific program, and by the way, you can get this data from the USDA, that they publish this information on a monthly basis. But as of right now, about 11.38% of Washington State's population appears to be accessing some form of the EBT SNAP benefits. They claim that there are 905,471 beneficiaries in Washington State today, and that really equates to about a little over 500,000 households, which means the rest are either spouses or kids. There's probably quite a few kids in this program, but it's surprisingly not as many as I would have expected, and that from compared to last year, that it's gone up about 1.48%. So that's stuff you can easily see out there. On a monthly basis, the state's spending about $167 million. And when I say the state, I should be clear here, this money's spent in the state, but it's all federal funds. The big thing I think that's really worth putting in perspective right now, because we're going to go back and revisit this, is the fact that since 2019, in Washington State, the SNAP beneficiaries, the population, the amount of money we spent on it, has increased almost 60%. And that's a huge, huge number. And we're going to look at a graph chart pretty soon. But it's all kind of concealed by this battle and fight and face-off between Bob Ferguson and Donald Trump. And really, it's more about the Trump derangement syndrome, just an opportunity for Ferguson to distract people from his own incompetence and corruption, and then direct it and blame Trump for everything. And that's kind of what's going on right now. But when you really dig into this, and it's important to kind of understand how this works, the SNAP EBT benefits that, for food stamps, for those, put it in historical context here, it's 100% federally funded. All that money comes in, and it is 100% covered by taxpayers, whether it's here or in other states. Now, DSHS, which is the state government entity, they're actually the agency that administers the SNAP benefits, just like they do Medicaid. And so when you go into an office anywhere in the state to apply for SNAP benefits or get your EBT card or Medicare or Medicaid, I should say, or anything like that, you go in through DSHS. They're the state face of a federal program. But it is mostly federally funded. In fact, even though the state does administer it, the feds still split about half of those administrative costs with us. So it's a relatively low-cost program from the state's perspective for the perceived benefit that they hand out to the community. And that's generally how food stamps that's how they've looked at the food stamp program for a long time. Now, of course, states, in order to qualify for being able to administer this federal program, they're obligated to have a fraud prevention and investigation program set up. And the reason why they do that is that if they don't have something like that, the feds, in theory, will not provide any money at all. But of course, Washington State, just like any other state, we have zero incentive to actually find any fraud, because the budget actually gets cut by the amount of fraud that's found. Now, I discovered this years ago when I was doing an investigation based on some whistleblower information into DSHS, and at that point in time, it was the Medicaid program that I was looking at, although I think there were some SNAP benefits as well. And it was whistleblowers in their fraud prevention program that were pointing out how Washington State was just concealing all the fraud and wouldn't actually do anything about it. And they were trying to push those numbers down or ignore them or pretend like they didn't exist, go through a kabuki theater where they pretended to have a fraud prevention program. And they were ignoring the actual employees who truly wanted to do a good job. And the reason for it was that every $1 million that you find in fraud, and there's a lot more fraud than that every month, if they report that and say, hey, here's how much fraud we found, then the feds reduce the budget the next cycle by that same amount. And so it's not something the state wants to have to deal with. And so it's better to just pretend like you have a fraud detection program and an investigation program, and occasionally, put a headline up where you bust somebody over here. But if you can ignore 99% of it, then you are incentivized to do that at the state level, and that's why. So it's kind of important to understand that that's one of the dynamics behind the scenes. Now, of course, if you're Bob Ferguson, he really needs to distract people from the failures and corruption of his administration. There's nothing impressive to see here. One of the reasons you can kind of see it, he looks like a deer in the headlights half the time when he's doing these press conferences, again, even if he bothers to have one. So he needs to distract away from this. And this whole SNAP argument, like, oh, you're going to be losing these SNAP benefits, it's a big deal, even though it has more to do with the Democrats in D.C. not wanting to open the government. Now, let's get into SNAP data in general. Part of what motivated me to do this video here was the whole thing that the USDA was talking about, which is the Federal Department of Agriculture, which is where the SNAP benefit program is theoretically administered at the federal level. They basically, when the Trump administration came back in, they had seen that same 60% level increase that you and I saw and referenced earlier here. And they said, well, listen, we just want to double check that, send us your list of people who are beneficiaries and we'll find out what's going on. Because there's obviously, we think there's a lot of fraud and there's obvious fraud. Everybody knows there's fraud. Let's see what we can uncover. 29 states complied with that request. Most of them Republican states, that's absolutely true, but they removed over 700,000 fake or illegal people who shouldn't have ever had these benefits. They were removed from the SNAP rolls. And these are the open and obvious ones. There's obviously a lot more they probably should have removed, but they got easily identified 700,000 just from those 29 states. Frankly, that's just about as many as the entire state of Washington has on the SNAP beneficiary program, as people who actually collect the cards. And they found that many people, almost that many people, that weren't real, it was fake, or they were illegals, they shouldn't have been getting it. So it was pretty significant. Now, 21 states, of course, and many of these are the big states, New York, California, places like that, they absolutely refused. Of course, Washington State is one of those states. It refused to comply because we certainly don't want to give it to them. And of course, Washington State was also involved with other states in suing the feds. How dare they ask us to actually expose any of the fraud or identify any of the fraud in our state, because we want to keep our fraud here. And that is what's going on right now. And again, I'm going to show you over here, this is the food stamp spending increase. You can see the sharp spike. I know COVID was a cover to justify squandering a lot of billions and trillions of dollars at the federal level, but that is an unusual and irrational and illogical spike for a program, and it has not come back down. It's elevated itself way above where it was in 2019. And one of the things I want to point out here, and this is, so, you got this other element to this. Thomas Sowell said it best, I think, where he pointed out, helping those who have been struck by unforeseeable misfortunes. It's fundamentally different from making dependency an absolute way of life. And that's part of this whole discussion about the whole SNAP benefits, and it's all wrapped into a bunch of other issues, I think, in Washington State. Obviously, our state government wants to keep it secret. And when you look at these pro-fraud states, and it's not hard to see which ones they are: California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, and of course, my favorite state of all, Washington State. We are the pro-fraud states. We're the Pro-Fraud Caucus when it comes to trying to resolve the fraud that exists in the SNAP EBT card programs. And just to be clear, Washington, D.C. is also part of that effort. So if you're Bob Ferguson right now, his main focus when he's fighting the Trump administration or trying to create these silly press conferences with two reporters, or he's afraid to take questions, or he abandons the state for a couple weeks to meet in a super secret out-of-state location, it's really, he's pushing and arguing for the fact that he wants to have the feds keep their hands off our criminals. Now, he's not as obvious about it as Chicago or Portland and New York to some extent. So I think in D.C., these guys have been getting a little bit more attention, but he has the same attitude. How dare the feds force us to arrest criminals? We'd rather just stew on them and marinate in the joy of having more violent criminals in our state. Of course, he also is arguing, how dare anyone force us to expose fraud in our grant programs? After all, if he did that, he might lose a lot of his donors, and how do you think they can recycle a bunch of campaign cash, if not through fraud distribution networks like the CCA program and others? And the last thing they want is anybody to go peek underneath the covers and see what's going on in this messy and behind the curtain, in this messy and ugly operation that we have in our state. Absolutely, he does not want anybody to be looking at the voter rolls in Washington state any more than he wants people to look at the SNAP beneficiary list, because they know there's a lot of problems that would be uncovered there as well. The last thing they want to do is do that. He certainly doesn't want the feds to actually get involved in preventing Washington state from handing out commercial driver's licenses to people who can't speak English, drive trucks, or have any background check. And he'd rather have those people out on the road killing people wherever they drive, including in those red states out there. And at the end of the day, of course, he absolutely is demanding that the feds give Washington state more dollars so that we can keep our secrets, our mail-in voting system, our bad commercial driver's license operation, our illegal criminals, and of course our drug cartels who are bringing in drugs now through the northern border, making Washington state epicenter of the drug distribution network in America. So of course this is Bob Ferguson's core platform and the main reason why he's having the big fight with Trump. And it also helps if he can say, hey, just don't blame me for all the incompetent disasters that my administration has in Washington state. You got to blame everything on Trump. It's always Trump's fault. We know this song and dance. It's amazing that you can find as many people to get suckered into this story as they have, but that's where we're at right now, and that's what's really going on. At the same time, it has to be recognized that Ferguson's got a tough balancing act here. I mean, if you really look at the crises and the kind of delaying, kicking the can down the road on some of these issues, it's fairly significant. The bad voter rolls, right? That is potentially a threat, not just to your future election potential, but also your entire political infrastructure. Protecting the criminals and illegals that you need, apparently, to justify a lot of these grant grifting operations, like the homeless industrial complex. The budget collapse that is being demonstrated every single time they decide to put forward a budget that it has no attachment to reality or the truth. Concealing fraud, which is so common in Washington state. I'm not sure Bob Ferguson could even distinguish where fraud exists and where it doesn't. And then, of course, there's the other things, the NGO grift for his friends, ignoring crime, pretending like it's not that bad, helping drug cartels so that they can be more established in our state, and, of course, giving the CDLs to illegals, which has been a big thing. These are just the obvious balls that he's balancing on his head, and it's not that fun, I don't think. Now, when we look at SNAP and the opportunity to maybe fix food stamps, I actually think what Benny Johnson had posted on TikTok or X just recently, I think that this was pretty much a good idea, the way that he mentioned it. Shut the whole thing down. We're already running out of money. This may be, I know they're supposedly doing like a half. The feds had enough in their emergency fund they could cover maybe half the EBT SNAP program this month. But next month, in theory, they're totally out of funds. Shut the whole thing down then, right now, and make everybody reapply. We have a limited amount of money in this country, despite how much we print money. But make everybody reapply. I mean, this isn't that difficult. And if you're already getting all this money, you can take the time to go down and do it. The government makes people jump through hoops all the time. And it does make sense when you're actually extracting other people's money for your own livelihood. You might as well go down and reapply. In doing so, I think we'd eliminate a lot of the fraud and illegals that are currently extracting taxpayer cash, taking those resources away from the truly needy and people who deserve to have it, and also, of course, wasting our tax dollars and preventing us from being able to fund other programs or not pay as much in taxes as we would otherwise. And of course, this is the different shift, and I'm in pretty strong agreement with this as well. Make sure that when it's restored, the program for people who qualify, that they buy healthy, basic food, fruits and vegetables, actual meat, things that are not highly processed, not flats of Coke, or junk food, candy, things like that. Just make it focused on food that you really need that's nutritious, not food that's garbage. As the recent TikTok people have demonstrated all over America. I don't know why people post these things on TikTok bragging about their fiascos, but nevertheless, that's demonstrated this is probably a necessary thing, and I think that people will be a lot healthier. And again, remember, Ferguson has this very tough balancing act right now. And in our state, I think this is a significant issue because he knows this whole thing's going to come crashing down. How do we know that? Because this is what always happens. Eventually, you can't keep the plate spinning. You can't hide behind the curtain forever. The emperor has no clothes. The fiasco comes crashing down. Math is real as much as they want to deny it. And eventually, reality catches up with you. And it does turn into a disaster like this. And there's nothing that we there's nothing Ferguson can do to prevent the fact that will happen. It's just a question of when. Usually the politicians want to kick the can down the road so it doesn't happen on their watch, but it is probably far enough along right now, especially with the Lafleur curve experience and all the layoffs are starting to happen up in the greater Seattle area with Amazon and other operations, that I don't think that the structure that the libs and the Dems in our state thought they had as far as taxes go, that's just falling apart right now. There'll be $500 million to a full billion, maybe $2 billion short as they squander the tax dollars on programs that are failing. We ultimately will have to have some kind of a plan to pick up the pieces. We live in a beautiful state with some of the worst political class people you could ever find. We do have clowns and crooks in government and our bureaucracy, but we're going to end up having to replace them at some point coming up soon, and we should be prepared and have a plan moving forward. But the only way that works is to come up with these solutions. Force them to go back and clean up the SNAP voter rolls, whether they like to or not. Force them to go in and actually clean up the voter rolls, the SNAP program, clean out fraud, fix some of their budget problems. Forcing them to do that, or at least document what we need to have done now, because eventually we will get sane and real people in there, and it's going to be helpful if they have a plan so they can hit the ground running. But this stuff only happens if we're willing to show up to make a difference. And the reason, I'll end this video like I always do, if you want to change the future, you have to be willing to show up, because the future only belongs to those who show up.